Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today, we're diving into Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. You've got a road trip, you've got wrenching on a bike, and you've got a whole lot of thinking about, thinking itself.
And that's what makes it such a classic. Pirsig blends personal experience with philosophical inquiry, even throwing in some practical advice on motorcycle repair in a way that really makes you stop and think.
Yeah, right from the beginning. We're on this cross-country motorcycle trip with Pirsig, his son Chris, and their friends John and Celia. And it's fascinating how Pirsig sees the motorcycle not just as a machine, but as a system of concepts worked out in steel.
It's almost like he's saying that the motorcycle is a physical manifestation of ideas, precision, functionality, the beauty of the machine. It's all connected to a deeper level of understanding.
And that way of thinking, that attention to detail and looking for the underlying form, could apply to so many things, even fixing a flat tire or dealing with a frustrating coworker. And speaking of frustrations, that's where Pirsig's theory of gumption traps comes in.
Think about those times when you're trying to fix something and you hit a wall. Pirsig breaks those moments down. Internal hang-ups and external setbacks, he calls them. He gives such relatable examples too, like when you put something back together in the wrong order. Or even worse, when the problem just vanishes as you're trying to fix it. That's the intermittent failure setback, a real gumption killer.
But what I found really interesting is his solution. He talks about the importance of inner peace of mind and how that applies to mechanics.
It's not just about finding Zen on a mountaintop. It's about tapping into that calm, focused state, even in the middle of a frustrating repair. It's about finding that harmony with the work, whatever that work may be.
So it's like fixing a motorcycle can be an art form if you approach it with the right mindset.
Exactly. And this is where his ideas about craftsmanship and quality really start to emerge.
Now here's where the journey takes an interesting turn. Throughout the trip, Pirsig keeps mentioning this figure from his past named Phaedrus. And slowly, we learn that Phaedrus was on his own intellectual journey. He was exploring deep questions about the nature of quality and how our own thinking can get in the way of experiencing it.
Phaedrus was wrestling with this conflict between reason and quality. It's as if he felt that our pursuit of pure logic had become disconnected from what's actually good and worthwhile.
He even draws a connection back to ancient Greece. He talks about how the sophists, who emphasized a concept called arte, meaning excellence or virtue, were overshadowed by Plato and Aristotle's focus on logic and reasoning.
And for anyone who's not familiar with the sophists, they were these traveling teachers who challenged conventional thinking and emphasized the importance of rhetoric and persuasion. They believed that truth was relative and that excellence could be cultivated through practice and skill.
And from this point, the book dives headfirst into philosophy, bringing in ideas from Socrates to Kant. It even touches on things like Lobachevsky's non-Euclidean geometry, which challenges our fundamental assumptions about space and reality.
It's about challenging our assumptions about how we think, about the very nature of reality itself. What if quality, what's good and worthwhile, could be a guiding principle for reason?
It's heady stuff, but Pirsig manages to make it engaging. And as they're on this physical journey, you see a parallel to what's happening with Chris. There's tension, there are breakdowns, there are these really intense moments.
It makes you wonder if the external journey mirrors Pirsig's internal struggles and his relationship with his son. It's as if he's trying to repair something within himself, something beyond just the motorcycle.
Remember that incident with John's motorcycle? John refused to even try to fix it himself when it broke down. He just wanted to take it to a mechanic.
That moment perfectly illustrates the clash between their worldviews. John embodies that frustration and distrust of technology. He'd rather delegate and not engage with it.
And then you have Pirsig, who's all about understanding the machine, seeing the underlying form, the concepts at work. And that's where his ideas about gumption come into play again.
He's all about overcoming those mental roadblocks and finding satisfaction and peace in the process of fixing something. It's not just about the outcome. It's about the approach, the mindset.
And their different approaches create this tension between them. It's like they're speaking two different languages.
It makes you think about your own relationship with technology. Do you approach it with curiosity, a desire to understand? Are you more like John, quick to give up and delegate?
It's interesting because Pirsig argues that technology itself isn't inherently bad. He even points out that the ancient Greeks didn't even have separate words for art and technology.
That's right. He traces the word technology back to the Greek word techne, which originally encompassed both art and skill. It makes you wonder if somewhere along the way we lost sight of that connection, that sense of beauty and craftsmanship in the things we create and use.
And maybe that's where the ugliness that John and Sylvia see in technology comes from.
Right.
It's not the objects themselves, but the relationship we have with them, the way we produce and consume them.
It's a distortion of that original unity of art and technology.
Now, they eventually reach this beautiful campsite. But even amidst this stunning natural beauty, things start to unravel, particularly between Pirsig and Chris.
Yeah, it's like the tension that's been building throughout the trip finally reaches a breaking point. And it's heartbreaking because you see how much Pirsig loves his son, but he struggles to connect with him.
There's that scene where Chris is having a meltdown, and Pirsig keeps referencing this poem by Goethe, the Earl King. It's about a father desperately trying to save his son from a supernatural being. But the son is slipping away, succumbing to this unseen force.
That's such a chilling parallel. It makes you wonder if Pirsig fears losing his son to something he doesn't understand, something he can't control. It highlights the idea that our internal struggles can deeply impact our relationships, especially with those we love the most.
And they finally reach Bozeman, Montana, where Phaedrus had taught at the university. Pirsig starts sharing more about Phaedrus's intellectual journey, specifically his struggle to define this concept of quality.
And this is where the book delves deeper into the philosophical side of things. Phaedrus starts questioning the very foundations of how we think, the assumptions we make about the world. He's convinced that quality exists, that we experience it all the time. But the moment we try to define it, it slips away.
It becomes intellectualized, losing its essence.
Exactly. He pushes back against the idea that quality can be objectively measured or analyzed. It's something we experience directly, something that goes beyond our attempts to categorize it. Think about it. When you experience something truly beautiful, a piece of music or a stunning sunset, can you really put it into words?
And that's where he starts having problems with the university. They're not exactly thrilled with his unconventional ideas, are they?
Not at all, especially his colleagues in the English department. They're entrenched in this traditional analytical way of thinking. And Phaedrus is challenging the very core of their beliefs. He even experiments with getting rid of grades in his classes.
Imagine trying that today. It's a radical idea even now.
He wanted to create a learning environment driven by genuine curiosity and the desire for knowledge, not just the pursuit of grades. It's fascinating to see how his students react. Some thrive, while others struggle with the lack of structure.
It highlights this tension between different approaches to learning, between intrinsic motivation and external validation.
And there's this one student, a young woman, who can't figure out what to write about. She's completely paralyzed by this fear of not being good enough. It's a powerful illustration of how expectations and judgments can stifle creativity.
It's like she's trapped in this cycle of self-doubt, and it prevents her from tapping into that creative spark.
And it resonates with Phaedrus because he's dealing with similar pressures. He's trying to find his place in academia, but he's constantly pushing against the established norms.
He's like a wrench in the gears of the system. But let's go back to the idea of quality. Phaedrus starts seeing connections everywhere, even in motorcycle maintenance. This brings us back to gumption, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Remember, it's not just about fixing things. It's about approaching any task, any challenge, with that sense of focus and harmony, the inner peace.
It's about being fully present in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's something as mundane as cleaning your bike chain. And that's where he brings in the idea of gumption traps, those mental blocks that derail our progress.
He gives some really great examples, things like anxiety, boredom, feeling overwhelmed by a task that seems too complex. He talks about the importance of taking breaks, stepping back from a problem to allow your mind to wander.
He even suggests turning routine tasks into a kind of ritual, finding a sense of peace in the repetition.
It's about shifting your perspective, finding a new way to connect with the task at hand.
And then there's this really interesting discussion of the Church of Reason, this idea that Phaedrus develops about the role of reason in our lives.
He's not anti-reason. He's simply saying that reason, while a powerful tool, has limitations. It can't fully capture the essence of quality. Think of it like this. Reason is like a map. It helps us navigate the terrain. But it can't convey the actual experience of the landscape, the beauty, the wonder, the sense of awe we might feel when we stand at the peak of a mountain.
And that brings us to this point about technology, right? He suggests that our modern obsession with technology is a manifestation of this imbalance, this overemphasis on reason.
He's arguing that we've become so focused on the how of things, the technical details, that we've lost sight of the why, the meaning and purpose behind it all. This leads to that sense of emptiness and disillusionment that John and Sylvia, Pirsig's traveling companions, are struggling with.
We've built this incredibly complex and efficient world, but have we lost something along the way?
That's the question Pirsig is grappling with. How do we reconcile the world of reason and technology with the world of quality and meaning? And that's what makes this book so relevant today. We're more surrounded by technology than ever, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed, to lose that sense of connection and purpose.
It's a reminder to step back, question our assumptions, and find a way to bring quality back into our lives. Maybe that means approaching our work with a new mindset, being more present in our interactions, or simply taking the time to appreciate the beauty around us.
It's about making conscious choices, finding that balance between the head and the heart, the technical and the soulful.
And that's a great place to pause. We'll pick up this discussion in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're nearing the end of our journey with Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance. And things are getting pretty intense for Phaedrus at this point. He's really pushed himself to the limit, trying to reconcile quality and reason. And it seems to be taking a toll. Yeah, he's in Chicago at this point. And he starts having these almost hallucinatory experiences. He's walking the streets, seeing this stark contrast between the beauty of nature and this harshness of the industrial world around him.
He's also feeling this overwhelming loneliness, like he's lost his way. The more he tries to define quality, the further it seems to slip away.
It's as if he's caught in a whirlwind, and it's starting to spin out of control. He's trying to teach, he's trying to write, but he's exhausted and disillusioned.
And you can really see how this affects those around him, especially his wife and children. It's a difficult thing to witness.
Yeah, he's withdrawing into himself, becoming more isolated. He fixates on this idea of finding the source of the split between quality and reason. He becomes convinced that the answer lies somewhere in the past, particularly in the writings of the ancient Greeks.
And then he stumbles upon this concept that really shakes him to his core. It's a Japanese term, muse.
Mu represents a kind of third possibility, a state beyond the duality of yes and no, true and false. It's a challenging concept to grasp, but it's central to Zen philosophy.
It's like realizing that the world isn't flat, that there's this whole other dimension you never even considered.
And it leads Phaedrus to a radical conclusion. Maybe the problem lies in the way we've been thinking about the world all along, this dualistic subject-object way of seeing things. He starts to believe that quality can't be captured or defined within that framework. It exists outside of it, in the spaces between.
But his quest for quality becomes all-consuming. It takes over his life to the point that it leads him down a path of mental and emotional instability.
He's not sleeping, he's not taking care of himself, and he's becoming increasingly paranoid and delusional. It's tragic because it really highlights the dangers of this relentless intellectual pursuit when it becomes unmoored from the realities of life.
And it all comes crashing down in this intense scene where he's confronted by a committee at the university. It's like the pressure finally breaks him.
It's heartbreaking. It raises questions about the nature of genius, the fragility of the human mind, and even the limits of reason itself.
And then the story shifts, and we're back on the road with Pirsig and Chris. We learn that Phaedrus is gone, that he's been through some kind of institutionalization, and that he's emerged as a different person.
He's still wrestling with these ideas about quality, but in a new way. It's more practical, more grounded in his everyday experience. He's not trying to force it into a neat intellectual box anymore. It's as if he's letting it emerge naturally through his interactions with his son, through fixing his motorcycle, through simply living his life.
And it's interesting because even though he's been through this incredibly traumatic experience, there's a sense of hope in these final chapters.
Yeah, he's still struggling. But he's facing his demons head on, and he's doing it with this newfound compassion and understanding.
And in those final scenes with Chris, you can really see the transformative power of quality. It's healing old wounds and creating a path forward. It's a beautiful, poignant ending to a deeply thought-provoking book.
Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance challenges you to think differently. It's not just about fixing motorcycles, it's about life itself.
So if you found these ideas intriguing, I highly encourage you to pick up a copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and take this journey yourself. There's a whole world of insights waiting to be discovered. Subscribe to the channel for more mindful moments. And consider purchasing the book using the link below. We'll see you in our next deep dive.